Party people, welcome to another Whatever Jerrod Says, episode 2. I think the first one went rather well. Thank you all for your feedback. Tonight, I think is going to be a really, really good interview. I think it's a very strong topic. Everybody seems to be talking about it. There's a lot of awareness. I don't want to spoil it, but we will get into it in a moment. Tonight, I have a very special guest, and I'll let him introduce himself. Prince, go ahead.
Well, I'm Prince, Army vet. I know Jerrod. We go back a couple of years now. We went to school together. Just hanging out, man. Doing some electrician work now. Just regular dude. Got kids.
Yeah.
Got a family, man. Hanging out. Just trying to do my thing.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight on here tonight. I appreciate it. I see you on Facebook a lot. I always value your opinion. We have some great discussions. And I think the purpose of Whatever Jerrod Says, this new format that I'm doing, is to invoke dialogue. I think dialogue is key. Anybody can insult anybody. I get it.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times I let the insults just roll off, or sometimes if I'm feeling like a smart ass, I'll just insult people right back too. And I can hold my own in that realm as well. But I prefer not to. I prefer to get to the meat and potatoes of things, right? And so I think one of the issues that I've seen you post or comment on lately on Facebook has to do with the statues being torn down, the Civil War monuments, and the bases that are changing their names that were named after some of these Confederate leaders and Confederate participants. What is your opinion? So people that don't read what you've been posting and commenting, what is your opinion about what do you currently feel that we should do as a nation when it comes to that type of issue?
I feel like as a nation, we kind of have to look at it, and we have to put ourselves in different perspectives. We have to put ourselves in different perspectives. And it's important for us to look at and value the opinions and, and not so much to sound like a quote unquote snowflake, but the feelings of our fellow countrymen, because it matters to a certain extent. Not even so much the feelings, but the opinions and how people are thinking about things and how people are seeing things. So me personally, I definitely agree with all the basic change of names. I agree with the Confederate flags getting banned, the statues getting torn down. And even if I get it, even from taking it from a personal, as a Black man standpoint, I ask people to just think about, like, hey, does the German army have a base named after Hitler?
Right.
Does the German army rock Nazi flags like outside of everywhere? Do Jews still have to feel that kind of like, man, that's kind of fucked up that that's still there? Do we still have to have that? And I think that resonates with people somehow. But in this country, there's a lot of deep-rooted pride. Yeah. And that pride gets in the way of, like, hey, this is not really right. This is not right.
No, I understand.
There's some things that we need to change. And I think, and I go back and forth with it. I got plenty, and most of my friends that I know that are white or otherwise, not Black. Most of them I know from the military or from a business perspective. That's why I met them, and we've grown a personal relationship. Right. So for me, it's more so about getting them to understand that I'm no different than I was when I served with you. I'm no different than I was when I went to school with you. Yeah, I may have grown a little bit. I may have matured a little bit, but my feelings don't come from an irrational place. It's not like, hey, I think if you break it down and you put it into a perspective of, hey, this is say America is a business.
Right.
I'm a CEO.
Right.
We have to identify the issues in our company in order to make our company better.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In order to make
I wouldn't
the
disagree
company
with
better.
that.
And I feel like these cries that have gone on, unheard for so long, it's no different than a shitty company. If you have a company that won't address the issues that it's happening within its realm, within its company, you're not going to get any better. People are going to be miserable. People are going to want change. People are going to want to either leave or want change. It's a little bit different when you start talking about leaving and we're talking about a country and you live here. That's kind of, it's a little different. And I mean, I guess there are a lot of people with the sentiment of, if they had it or if they knew they would be secure wherever they were going, they would leave. I don't necessarily think I would leave, but I also, because I'm more of a, like, let's clean this shit up, not just walk over it and go over this side. Let's clean it up. And I think it's very important to understand that it's legitimately a slap in the face to a
Right.
lot of African-American people in this country. Let's take Georgia, for example. You go to one of the counties that they have there, is like a Confederate flag flying outside the courthouse.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if it's still doing it ever since everything's happened, but think about what kind of, like, if you're going there for a speeding ticket, how happy am I going to be, or how excited am I going to be, or how am I going to feel when I walk into that courtroom knowing that this is the general sentiment of the people around here? And how can I avoid that feeling if I see it? It's a visual representation of something that no longer stands, that's not supposed to be, the losers of, you can go into the losers of the Civil War and traitors, and you can go into all that, but it's just kind of like, hey, what that stood for means that your family wanted my family in chains and shackles, and I'm not really cool with that, and I'm not cool with that representation, or you flying it like that. You want to have some deep, like, I'm cool with statues being in the Civil War Museum. I'm cool with the flags being there. I'm cool with the uniforms being there. But, to be flying it around, I feel like there's just no reason. I feel like it's a very ignorant thing to do. Now, I don't say it as a disrespectful thing as far as ignorant, but I just don't think a lot of people put in perspective like, hey, bro, if you knew my grandfather was beating the shit out of your grandfather on a consistent basis, do you think I'd be happy about the institution that your grandfather stood for?
Yeah. So if I may interject real quick, because you have a lot to unpack. You give us a great deal to talk and think about.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Shoot, I said I was going to time this, but I did. So I can see this is going to go a lot longer than I thought, and we might just get cut off. But anyways, first off, I want to address the point where you said about Nazi Germany and all that kind of stuff real quick. I don't know enough about Nazi Germany's history to know if they have bases named after somebody that was a dickhead in World War II.
It's banned. It's federally banned.
I would assume that they would not, right? Like, so that's a smart thing to do, right? But I also don't believe that Nazi Germany, I think there's a kind of a colossal difference between a civil war, because we don't have bases necessarily named after English patrons of war during our independent war, right? So you're not gonna, we don't have, maybe we do. I haven't seen any statues of Charlemagne, the French general who really, gave us our independence. Yeah. So with that though, like, and the reason why I point that out is because I think a lot of people watching this, really, if we're going to compare things, if they don't have the history, then it's just something that they should look up. So for me, okay, so I can concretely say with factual basis that Germany doesn't have bases named after, German soldiers, that's based off of my research. Right. So then we go back to, you had a couple other things that I want to address, but I'll get to that. The first question I think I want to know, because I've seen a lot of back and forth on this, is that let's say you're walking down the street in Atlanta and you see, or you're in Virginia, probably a better place to be for this scenario, is that you're somewhere in Virginia and you see a statue of General Lee. You as a black man looking at that statue of General Lee, what is your feeling? What are your emotions?
My general feelings when I look at it, I'm not going to put too much invested in it until I read the footnote at the bottom of the thing. I don't know. I don't care. I don't care enough to know about General Lee. I don't care. You were a dickhead as far as I knew. Like that. That's where my general sentiment comes in at. Like, oh, okay, I don't really care. But I think what we're touching on is ideologies.
100%. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah.
That I'm going to revere this person that really shouldn't be revered. You might have been a great tactician. You might have been a great strategist.
But for general public to actually, respect that as a monument, like average Joe who works at Dairy Queen could give a shit if Schwarzkopf was a great general. You know what I mean?
And I know that you should, and I know that we shouldn't, we shouldn't look at it and be like, oh, this is, what I'm going to look at as the average guy. But I just think that, it's kind of like a rectification. And it seems like a lot at one time. Mm-hmm. It does. It really seems like a lot. But, I mean, we can go back over time and look at how many times a black person has made a song about just the general state in this country
Sure.
from our standpoint as Black people.
Sure.
Look, you got Gil Scott-Heron songs. You got Nina Simone songs. This is not something that's new.
Oh, I listen to Say It Loud by James Brown every time I ride my bike, and the lyrics are pretty damn pointed.
And then the way it moves down the timeline, you got Tupac made songs about it.
Sure.
You got J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, up until these times. And for me, it's almost awe-inspiring because it's like, man, it took a guy just really getting killed by a cop having his knee on his neck to understand that we have an issue with police brutality. And I make the amends with saying that, and like, yes, police may kill, and we can break down percentages and numbers, and shit like that. The one aspect, and this is a tangent, so excuse me.
No, go ahead.
The one aspect that really irritates me is that even if it wasn't for the numbers, even if it wasn't, okay, well, more Black people get killed by, XYZ, ABC, we can go, oh, well, Chicago has, which is a poor problem, not really a color problem, it's a poor problem. Now, when we sit back and we look at how we're dealing with or how we're bringing about the change now, it's awe-inspiring to me because it's like, man, we've really sat back. We've really seen this stuff happen. And my issue with it, as it pertains to Black people, is that these deaths are more gruesome when it comes to Black people. They're more gruesome.
Right.
That's my issue with it. It's not that white people don't. So
can you correlate that with the removal of statues and renaming bases?
Yes. There's an issue. It's been called out. It's been spoke on. Now, I served at Bragg for 8 years. 8 years is some change. Did I really ever think about it when I was going back and forth to Fort Bragg? No. Yeah. When it was brought to my attention, did I think it should be changed? Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a P in the pod, what am I going to say to the IG at Fort Bragg? Like, hey, bro,
right.
I
get that.
I'm not going to have the kind of impact that a whole nation saying, hey, whoa, this is fucked up, change it now. I'm not going to have that impact.
Yeah.
So did I think about it personally? No. When it was brought to my attention and I understood who Bragg was, it was like, I don't know. You should change that as soon as possible. So that's where my general sentiment is with the changing the names of the bases. Like we should change them. Yeah. We should change them. Well, why? Because it's an issue. And why do those people deserve to be revered or by having their names plastered all over a base?
Sure.
Why do they? That's
well. And here's a simpler form that I explain to myself. Here's a way that I try to justify it. First off, you heard you're erasing history, and I just want to. I'm gonna. There's another question I'm gonna ask you in a minute. Because I've seen this a lot. But first off, history. Let me explain how we're destroying history here. I can be in Iowa. I've said this before. I can be in Iowa, the middle of Iowa at 3:00 in the morning, and I can find the diet of a three-toed sloth from my phone. History will not be erased. It will not. In fact, every day we learn more about history through DNA research and through archaeological discoveries and things like that. If those nerdy archaeologists want to stay employed, they better keep digging and finding shit, right? And that's what history is, right? Yeah. Otherwise, if you really truly want to delete history, then you delete science and then you delete, exploration and understanding. So for that argument, about taking a freaking marble statue down or a stone statue down, that I don't even care to have them in a museum. Honestly, I don't care. But a simpler way to kind of explain this is that if you have a name that may have a history or heritage to it, and it really, really, really upsets people, and you could put another name that wouldn't really, really upset people, why would you keep the name that upsets people? And I don't, it doesn't really because if it really doesn't matter, like Bragg himself, great tactician or whatever the case may be, right? I don't know enough about Bragg, but let's say he was an amazing, what is he, a general? I don't care to know, right? Like, I don't even really care a lot about the Revolutionary War. I don't, or our Civil War, other than the fact that we've progressed from it. If we've regressed from it, if we had this whole war and people died over and over and over again, and we made zero progress because of it, then I would be like, what the F? You know what I mean? And I am. A lot of times I'm like, what the F over the Iraqi war and the Afghanistan wars, right? Because we made zero progress on that. And I lost very good friends, right? And so when we're talking about our own country and things like that, when it comes to this stuff about, history and things like that, I find that, to me, I personally find that just a ridiculous argument. Now, going back.
I haven't really heard a decent argument to counter, like, hey, we should change this. I haven't heard one.
Right.
And other than like, oh, well, what about this? And why are people crying about it? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's been wrong for a while.
Right. And so, okay, again, I can go off this tangent. I'm gonna go back to some questions here real quick. Okay. So one question is that so would you agree that because I've seen you post this, and I think it's partially related to our national anthem. I personally wouldn't want our national anthem replaced. I don't want our flag replaced because, as you mentioned, as angered or emotional as people get over looking at the rebel flag, that symbology, it's called symbolism and
symbology
or sociology. So the symbolic interaction that people have with that flag, you find so there's an argument today. I saw a black kid one day wearing a rebel flag in his hat, and it was like 2 a.m. I'm in a gas station. I was like, you know what that flag represents? He was like 17, and I was like, you know what that flag represents? And he's like, yeah, I'm a rebel, man. I'm against the government stuff. And I, you know what? But I allowed him to have that because at 2 a.m. at a Shell gas station is not.
You're not changing
the history lesson, right? You know what I mean? I just gotta get home. You know what I mean? And if the dude is okay with it, then it's not my business, right? I don't have to change people's minds. You change your own mind based off of the information you're given. So I'm sure if I sat him down and or somebody sits him down, maybe he might have a different perspective. Maybe he just looks at it as a symbol, the same way that a foreigner looks at the American flag as, or McDonald's, arches, right? So would you say that, and I think you have said, to really like kind of start making change in relation to taking the statues down and whatnot, that we just got to clean the slate?
I think in some ways, yes, in some ways, no.
Okay.
I'm torn because I think if you tear things back down, there's gonna be a tumultuous time. Like if we're really gonna start making progress and change, that change, I feel like it's not gonna really take effect until like a good 15, 20 years from now.
Sure.
You're not gonna start seeing
change is slow. It is really slow.
You're not especially when you're talking about this macro level change, like hey, the whole nation and we're trying to change all this stuff. I think it's just gonna be change that we're gonna have to now clean the slate. No. But what I will say is we have to take an honest look at reform. We have to look and see, we have to make reform something we can touch, something we can feel. We have to make it like, okay, something that we can see, even if it's slow, we can see it. Okay, cool, this is what they're doing. Even now, you've heard the voices, and I'm not going to say quelled to a point where they're quiet because we still have issues that are going on, but you've heard the voices kind of progress with the more companies are like, hey, yeah, this is fucked up. Hey, yeah, these people need to be given more opportunities. And yes, even more so than they have in the past because XYZ, you know, all these things have happened.
Right.
So I think that it's very important that if we aren't going to clean the slate, we have to give an honest effort at reform. A very honest.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say. I think some people. So I think one of my arguments or one of my concerns, I guess, with people that want to eliminate the statues, again, I don't really care. But if they want to eliminate the statues and they're saying it causes too much repressed thought, right? It's hard for me to be, say, a 23-year-old kid. I've heard 23-year-old. It's hard for me to look at General Lee and not think that we were in chains 400 years ago, right? Or comments like that, right? And I think the problem with eliminating that kind of history, you're trying to do away with that, I have an issue with, right? Simply because you couldn't revere somebody like Booker T. Washington. You couldn't revere Martin Luther King Jr. You couldn't revere W.E. Du Bois or Langston Hughes, these very prominent black men, Rosa Parks, black woman, you know,
because of time.
All of that is associated with slavery. All of that is associated with segregation. right? And
in a way, it's all associated.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So, like, if we were to try to eliminate, that's the only history, that's the only issue that I have with kind of like eliminating history. Sometimes you have to face your evil, right? So, being diagnosed with PTSD, and I give a little social psychoeducation. So, you have immersion therapy, right? You have to face your trauma to get rid of it, right? And I think the whole issue that I have right now with the movements that, and not just one, like all the movements, is that we're stagnant. It's not a movement at all. We're staying stagnant. We're talking about historical things, which is fine to bring up. But if the resolution, like you said, if there's no reform, right, then it's just talk. We're just standing here saying 200 years ago, this sucked.
And okay, that's why I'm not as that, and that point that you just made is why I'm not so, like, yes, I want the statues to come down. There's no reason really for them to be up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, well, there's no reason for them to be up. I want them to come down. But at the same time, just as bad, or even worse, like, or even, I guess how I'm trying to say it, like, what I want more is for jails to be reformed. I want police reform. I want police to be able to know how to train, how to think critically, and not be able to always fall back on, I got scared. You know, like,
and that right there is that's another tangent, right? That's something that we can go off. What I think maybe you might be trying, and I don't want to speak for you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so police reform is a systematic issue, and it's not really a black or white thing, because so police action should be objective. It should not be subjective at all. It shouldn't be a matter of color of skin or wealth or anything like that. It should be. And I think another thing that people have a problem with is everybody who cries equality doesn't really truly understand equal outcome. Right? Like, so you can have a woman that says, I want to be treated like a man, but she really doesn't want to go, I want to be equally as a man, but she doesn't want to go in a bar and say, F you, asshole, and then get a right hook to the jaw. Right? I know someone, trust me, I know some women that are right up there and be taking that right. They give you a right hook to the jaw. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to generalize women, and this isn't an attack, but what I'm saying is that when we're talking about equality, we have to be very careful about what we talk about. And when you say reform, the reform has to have equal outcome for everybody. It has to truly be equal, and everybody has to have buy-in in it, right? Because everybody, like the whole white privilege argument, right? For me, I find it ridiculous, right? And not that I'm not sensitive to the idea that some people have it better than others. What I find ridiculous about it is that, one, we never asked to be who we are, right? We were just born, right? And now we're in this world. And ideally, if we're just remaining stagnant right now, it is 2020, right? We have made systemic progress. People are saying there's systemic racism. Well, then we just suck as a country if it's systemic racism. And here's why: because you had a person, you had a group of people back in the 50s that had a dream, if you will, right? And they marched and they got knocked down. Martin Luther King Jr. needed violence. He needed it to get that message across, because he's going to show you that no matter how bad it can be, he can be peaceful. And he's going to, and he was going to display this. Well, it wasn't just him. It was a group of people, right? It was leaders that had a cause, right? And they marched forever. And then
rest in peace, John Lewis.
But the civil rights movement was passed in 64 and 68. So it shows that the system itself was making progress. When we sit here stagnant and we don't use the system for the way it was, when we have laws, anybody that argues about shit that isn't using the law, for example, equal work or equal pay for equal work amongst everybody, right? If you work for an organization and you do the same job and you find out that somebody's making $1 less and you're doing the same shit, if you're not going into that boss and demanding that money and he says no and you're not suing that company, you're not using the laws that we as the voice are doing. So when to stay on topic and stay on point, if we're saying remove racism from society, right, an attempt by, just taking statues down and changing a song, some song lyrics, well, then what do you want? You know what I mean? Like, we need a collective voice. We have representatives at Capitol Hill that make decisions for us all the time without our input, but it's not their fault, because we're not talking. We're polarized. We're black and white. We're Republican. We're Democrat. We're men and women. and we're on a polarized scale that we're not meeting in the middle and even having a conversation about. We're just pissed off on our side.
But here's where I make the point, and this is where I'm gonna toe some lines right here. But when you have like the you got, for instance, the LGBTQ plus,
yeah, sure,
divided by, I don't, however, no disrespect,
right,
you know, no disrespect, but you
yeah,
know,
yeah, and it's something we should learn, right? Yeah, you're right.
They had a voice, they made a cause, they put it together, it went up there, it passed through.
Yeah,
those are the type of things that are irritating to me, only because we've had these same issues, we've had these same problems with jails, with police, for decades upon decades, if not a century.
Yeah,
and we've been like, hey, this is kind of fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have people even still, after you do get the Civil Rights Act, which, like, why was that a thing? I don't know, but okay, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Why was it even a thing in the first
that,
place?
Yeah.
You know, and that's when we have to take it. But I think when we make that voice and we say, hey, look, you know, when we address that systemic issue of racism, like, do I believe that even if we righted all the wrongs and made all the laws change and we fit it to make, is there still going to be some people with some implicit bias?
Yeah,
sure.
Well, there's absolute proof to that.
You're never going to get rid of it.
You touched on. I'm sorry. Sorry.
But no. But on the same token, I don't want it to be effective. I don't want it to affect my job. I don't want it to be able to affect my,
that's the reality I'm talking about. Yeah, that's the reality I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't want it.
I think we have a lot of emotion invested in the way that we believe. I'm white. I was just talking to my wife about this earlier. I've never really considered myself a white person. In fact, I had a gay black man
white,
drove in my lift car.
You're white, Jerrod.
I drove this gay black dude yesterday in my car, and he goes, "Hey man, what's your nationality?" I was like, "I'm German, Irish." And he goes, "I knew you weren't white. I knew you weren't white." And I was like, "What the hell does that mean, man?" And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not white now. But I've never really considered myself that, right? And I also don't, I've never really considered myself atypical male. Although I do have atypical male tendencies, it's never been a priority for me to be manly. You know what I mean? I understand I'm a man and I accept that. But I made that up. I didn't let society do that. And so when we get into that, like that identity crisis that we have, you know, I think we tie a lot of emotion to that. And then we allow a lot of times the emotion to overcome that. We're not meeting this balance point between factual basis and emotion. So for example, if a person sees a General Lee statue and says, "Oh my God, I'm offended by that because of the history behind it," there's a lot of emotion in that, right? And they're like, "It must be torn down." But you know what ends up happening? A statue of Don Quixote gets torn down too. Why? Nobody fucking knows. We're just mad. Don Quixote didn't own any slave, and he was driving force to stop it. So I got the kids coming in. All right. Yeah, hey, being a dad don't stop, right? So
it doesn't stop.
Not even for whatever Jerrod says.
No,
but anyways, what I'm saying is, man, is that and we might have to do a part 2 to this eventually.
Yes.
Because our recording time's coming down to an end. But like what I'm getting is that if we can come to if you really want reform and we want change and want things like that, we have to swallow pride. We have to swallow emotion a little bit.
Of course.
And factual basis. So when you're saying things like police reform and we're saying cops kill black men and other people say, well, what more white people get killed by cops? The issue is that people are dying. And we have to look at what's causing the death. Not that it's just cops. Right? We have to put factual basis to it. I mean, the reality is more cops die by people than people die by cops, right? Per capita. If we're looking at that physical argument, you know, at least 50 cops a year die from gunshots, from gunfire.
Yeah.
And they are a smaller, there's only, you know, I think it's last count was like 400,000 of them. So when you have 41 million and, you know, 289 million, 40 million black people, 289 million white people against 400,000 people. That's like less than a percentage of what. So it's one person patrolling 1,200 people.
Yeah.
And then 50 of them will die. You know, that's a so what are we doing?
It's a very lot. I say, and I definitely on topic on that. I say that's why I don't necessarily, I'm not the defund the police, get rid of them.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no,
what are we doing?
Yeah,
what are we doing? Because if my daughter's somewhere and there's something wrong, and I'll go to jail because I'll kill everybody. Like I need the police to intervene. There needs to be some authority 100%. There to intervene. I just think the fractured relationship and the long arm, and there's a lot of things that feed into it. We look at over policing, we look at, in certain communities rather than others, and you have to look at how that community got that way. We'd be ignorant and we'd be hard pressed to just look the other way and be like, oh well, they're just in Chicago killing each other.
Sure.
We have to look at, and then we have to address and take a real hard look at ourselves and say, well, why haven't they been receiving funding?
Yeah.
Why hasn't there been and that's why I'm more of a proponent of like, hey, look, if we're gonna do it, let's do it the right way. Let's get the police, let's get them some different training, let's get them some psychoanalysis, or let's get them looked at.
And all that takes money, and unfortunately that's what it's gonna come down to is money.
But
ideally
here's where I pull back from that. Okay, look, it's gonna take money. But to be honest, I think that we could probably skip am I still there? I think we could probably skip like $100 billion off of the defense budget.
You're still there. It's going in and out. That's all right. We got you.
I think we could skip $100 billion off of the defense budget. And plug it into some of these neighborhoods that are hard pressed.
We could take $1 trillion from the medical industry too. We could take $1 trillion from big
I
pharma.
think if the Department of Defense only had $685 billion, which is
it'd be all right.
Hey, like I'm not saying take all the money away from them, because of course we want to be protected. That's what everybody wants. I don't think the common theme changes. Sure. We want to be protected. We want to have our military. We want to have that. But I think they'll be okay with 685 instead of 700.
Yeah. There might be a few less coffee mugs and bumper stickers out there. But like, I got you. And I definitely think we need to be more fiscally sound as a country. The issue that I have, though, is that there's a lot of people. So this country right here, in my honest opinion, is the best country to live in, right? We have faults, but every country has faults. And if we look at our faults in comparison to other countries, we are a free society. We're a capitalistic society. People want to come here by the hundreds of thousands every year, and they live in some pretty damn good places. And I've been to those places, right? But the thing is I think in our country, as big as its faults are, I truly believe that you have a choice in this country, right? If you don't like what's going on in Texas, man, you could pack up and leave and go to Atlanta tomorrow, right? And there's a lot of countries you can't do that, right? And I think that when we're talking about, I think that we are privileged. I think Americans are so privileged that we can call each other privileged within America, right? And we're really spoiled as a country. And when we take time to argue and put our emotion in these arguments, instead of moving forward, we're not even progressing right now. Freddie Gray happened in 2016. It's exactly the same argument and movement that happened with the George Floyd thing. George Floyd got 22 days on media, and now we're back to COVID again. We're not making progress on this. You can paint all the BLM.
I think that you made a very important statement when you said that we do have choices. We have choices. Some are impacted more than others, and some have a little bit more free will with their choices, obviously. But at the end of the day, I think that from the time Freddie Gray nationally, and this is where I fault the Department of Justice, because if you're going to be the Department of Justice, be the Department of Justice.
Right.
Take a forward step and say, hey, look, this is what we're going to do, because we recognize that this is an issue. We want everybody to feel safe. We want this to happen for everybody, all of our citizens. And we understand that these are problem areas, so we're going to address these problems, and we're going to put money here. We're going to put help here. We're going to make sure that these people are all right, because when have they ever got it?
Right.
You kicked off a little bit for, you fucked off a little bit for welfare.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you get people that criticize that, but it's like, hey, we're in a capitalist society. There's always going to be poor people.
Yeah. It's a function. But see, our poor people don't have to be homeless. That's the issue, right? Our poor people can live in dormitory living. Our poor people can have structures. We have right now. I could drive by and see abandoned shopping centers.
Yeah.
That could double as homes. I mean, the property value is low because they're in crappy areas. The government come in and yeah, like you said, if you take $100 billion from the military budget, now you provide a community and you put rules into that stuff too. So I'm
that's
with
$1 billion. That's $1 billion to every major city, and then some.
It doesn't even cost $1 billion. It doesn't.
No.
I mean, there's multitudes of between Canada and the United States. I think over in Nevada, there's an old Army vet that built a community of the old pods, the old transfer.
The moving pods,
the
connexes,
things, whatever. So he built them and he put rules into it. You can stay here. This is the rule set. Room's got to be clean, dorm inspections, whole nine. And they were for other vets, right? It's for homeless vets. And I thought, like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And if we put that on a larger scale, and the cost was only like $150,000 for the dude. And he got local investors, local contractors and construction crews to do work and invest in it as well. So it didn't cost it was like a 50 unit place, but and families were moving in, and it sure as hell beats living in a tent under a bridge or wherever, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think though the problem so when you're saying Department of Justice, when we say Department of Education, we say Department of this and Department of that our issue is that we have the 10th Amendment, which allows the state to control its own governance, right? And I like that idea. What I don't like is having to rely on big federal government, right? So when we're saying Department of Justice, they really got to put their guidelines down.
Question. Yeah. Why don't, and this is probably going to lead into something, and I don't want it to go too far, but why don't you want to rely on the federal government?
I think because I think we are a country of diverse interests, right? And so for example, take what we have going on today with the coronavirus. If the 10th Amendment didn't exist and it was only the 9th Amendment and we wrote an amendment, every reaction in every state would be the same. So if you have a person who we voted in, he says, everybody's in lockdown. Guys like you that need to go out and feed their kids are now in lockdown. See, it's easy for the government to say, lock it down. It's not, if they're not giving us money, that affects us, right? And so if you're like, crap, we're locked down in Michigan and I need to do work and I got job opportunities in Texas, I'm going to pack up and go to Texas because that's open. But if the federal government steps in and says, boom, here's the other thing too. Say South Dakota needs ventilators and New York needs ventilators. If it's all federally owned, the same amount of equal money goes to each state. It's only fair to argue that, right?
Okay, so, from a money standpoint, I can understand that.
And even supplies and all that stuff, right? So if the federal government collects all the pool of money, right, and puts it in one big pot and divides it equally like a socialist state, people that live in states with less people will have more automatically. And so that's why you allow the state to governance. And the states can ask the feds for help when they're having issues. But then there's got to be a guideline. There's got to be a set point, right? Like
there's got to be oversight. There's got to be I am so tired of money by the millions and billions getting handed out, and then they're like, "Whoops! Oh, we gave Bank of America 8,500 million, or whatever, to get." And I'm like, "Who was watching this? Who's like, hey, no, don't do that. Like,
here's
why don't
my
we
issue?
have
So if you want federal oversight, I'll tell you federal oversight. Jeff Bezos made $191 billion with a B billion dollars in 2019. He gave his wife in a divorce settlement $82 billion. He has.
I thought it was 136.
What's that?
I thought it was 136.
Well, I don't know. The initial report I read was $82 billion. They had collectively they had $183 billion. She got $82 billion in the settlement. Numbers might be bigger or lower. My point is that he was paying people minimum wage. Now that everybody's like, oh, he pays $15 an hour. You know how he did that? He cut full-time work. He cut 44,000 full-time workers hours to part-time and paid them $15 an hour. He actually made money by doing that. And so if you want federal oversight, you give people a good earned wage to live and survive.
I'll say this, honest federal oversight where somebody's like, hey, that's not right. But then we get into laws, and that's when we have to start making. And I think that
you can also get into natural law too, man's penchant for violence and greed and all that kind of stuff too. I mean, our currency used to be chickens and eggs. right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you had 6 eggs, you got a good pair of shoes. And if you were the cobbler, you got a good shovel because you gave the shoes away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's all about control of resources. But and I'm not talking about socialist level. That's I just don't want that, right? Because I have different interests than everybody.
I agree. The diverse interest is definitely like something that we have. So you can't have one sweeping thing. But I think just me, you identify our areas where we're weak at, and you act on them. We have the same way we have the House and Senate sit down and we try to fix stuff and pass stuff through. I think if we could do it, and my problem is, and this is why I ask you that question because I disagree sometimes with the federal government stepping in, and the reason why is because they suck at their jobs.
Yeah. I'm 100% on board with that. We need to.
Yeah.
Gus Bilrakis is my representative where I live. I call him at least once a month. I email him all the time, and I get a phone call once a week, whether it be a voicemail thing or whatnot. I get invited to meetings. I've been on phone chat meetings where I got to say my point. I know who my rep is, right? So I think we all need to be involved at that level. He's my representative, and he's my voice. And if I truly want him to say something for the collective good of people,
he needs to hear what you have to say.
I first need to contact those people that I know share my interest. And if it's enough people, or a loud enough voice, then he can go and fight for it. If it's just me in the corner bitching that I don't like crunchy peanut butter, I can't expect a national change to crunchy peanut butter, right? But, fuck crunchy peanut butter. Anyways, okay, so I think I went over my time.
Crunchy peanut butter should definitely be abolished. Whatever.
I think I went over my time, and I don't know if this is going to collectively record everything. I might have to edit it. So this second half could have very well been deleted. If I can break it down to a part 2, we'll figure it out. But
okay, yeah,
I'm gonna close this out. But I want to ask you: do you have anything going on? Anything you like to plug? I know you were doing a podcast before.
The Put On Podcast. I've got it. It's on Facebook, Twitter, IG. You can find it, the Put On Podcast, and on all your social platforms. Other than that, hey,
all right.
I'm just out here trying to think.
Send me the link, and I'll make sure I apply it to the YouTube, and people can click on that link, right?
Okay, sure thing.
All right. Prince, thank you so much for doing this.
Not a problem, man. We definitely got to do a part 2. I really want to do is be able to for us to meet up somewhere and do something like an open dialogue where we have it, we can record it all, and we can get it all out there. We can just let it flow. Like, hey, look,
absolutely.
Nobody's in their emotions. We just having a couple beers and we're talking about shit that we want to see. We want to see change and how we want to see it change. So
and that's a good point. Excellent point. We want to see change, but how do we make that change? Anybody can complain. It takes a real leader to make a solution, right? And those solutions aren't always correct, but somebody's got to make them, right? You didn't always like that LT, but man, when the LT was spot on, you followed his order. And if he's a good LT, he learned.
I mean, even if he wasn't kind of happy, but whatever.
You got to have his back, man, right? You got to have his back.
You got to have his back.
And if he's a smart LT, he'll listen to good NCOs and good private/airmans. But you get what I'm saying. So
I dig the Air Force plug.
That's right, man. Airman, man. Look, man, I know what I did. All right. Anyways, thank you again, Prince, for coming. Everybody, thank you for watching. I appreciate this. If you like this stuff, like and subscribe. Tell your friends. If you are interested, as usual, if you're interested in an issue and a topic, everybody's pissed off about something right now, and you want to bring it to the limelight to everybody to hear, hit me up, write me, and we'll go at it. Well, I'll interview you too. All right. This isn't, I don't discriminate. I only ask for respect from everybody. If you get disrespectful, I'll pull it back in and we'll talk like human beings. I promise that. But if you like this, again, keep watching, keep liking, keep subscribing, get it to all your friends. As usual, this has been another Whatever Jerrod Says. God bless you. God bless your family. And God bless America.